What does faith mean? And what exactly do you have faith in? Faith, of course, means something beyond your understanding, something beyond reason and logic. Now, sometimes it could be real faith means beyond logic, beyond reason. Sometimes we could believe in something and it's, it's below reason and logic, not above. So if you believe in, well, whatever, I'm not going to go there. But to believe that there is a creator of heaven and earth, that's not faith. That's not, there's reason. There's logic to that. There's reason and logic to that. Right? Just as simply you see a beautiful building planned and the architecture and the engineering is exceptional. You know that there's an architect, there's an engineer to the building. Well, this world is, and these galaxies are much more perfected than any, you know, any building or any edifice that a human has made. Just look at the body, human body. So as God is creators, you don't need emuna. You don't need faith for that. Even the God that we matter to Him, you don't really necessarily need faith for that. Perhaps where you need faith is when you see devastation, or you see a 3-year-old child, God forbid, that has a terminal disease, and that you have faith, you believe that God is all good, even though before you don't see the goodness. You might struggle. So there, you need faith. You need to be able to, of course, if it's something that is happening in your life, to be able to trust that it's all good. And that's a capacity we have because the soul is not defined by logic and reason. And therefore, the human being is not defined by logic and reason and the mind, even though the mind is the greatest element of the individual. But we're not limited and defined by that. We have a neshama, we have a soul. And since that soul is the image of God, part of God, just like God created logic, rationale, and He's not limited to it, so the soul is not limited to it either, and not defined by it. It has a deeper element in it called emunah, faith, that leads us to have bitachon, trust in God. Welcome to Tanya today. I'm Rabbi Ronnie Fine, coming to you from Chabad Zurich Haggadah in Montreal, Canada, where it's a privilege and pleasure to share with you the Tanya. We conclude today chapter 33. Chapter 33 is about joy. Joy and more joy. And today we conclude with a rejoicing doubly. And it's based on a faith that we have. The first is in God's unity. Now, God is creator, very rational and logical, but that only God exists and I'm not separate from him, even though we have a rational understanding through different metaphors and so on, right? And we understand there's a rationality to it and why it must be that way, as we've discussed on and on. But in the end, it's not something I experience. It's not, it's something, it's a faith that we have. Again, faith doesn't mean there isn't rational understanding to it. Faith means that it's beyond my experience. There's rationality to it, but you could, give a rationale differently. So it doesn't, it doesn't have to be. And so the unity of God? There's nothing else but him. I'm not separate from him. I'm a part of God. Again, we've gone through. Right? Now, why does that bring joy? Is because then God's close. He's not distant. If God is, the long white beard in the heavens above, so he's far, he's distant. Maybe he sees me, but he doesn't see me. But if there's nothing else but him, he's the only reality. I feel separate from him, but he doesn't feel separate from me. Totally united and one with me. I'm a part of him. When I meditate and think about that, that brings a sense of closeness, and that brings joy. When you feel close to a beloved, that brings joy. Today, the Alter Rebbe adds a redoubled joy, a joy and pleasure which our faith brings to God. Was that what we bring to God something? What is that? What do we bring to God? Through our faith in God's unity, that the negative side of the world, right, unholy side, the darkness, when it's subdued, when darkness is transformed to light, right, that light that obscures on God's light, which will ultimately be in the end of days when Mashiach comes, right? When we do that, that brings joy to God. That's a faith that we have. It's not something I experience at least, right? We have a faith that when we take the negativity inside of us, negativity of the world, and we transform it into light, that brings God joy. I might say, like, what is, God's beyond. What does he care? Well, his personal interest in us. So when we know that when we crush the negative side and we transform darkness into light, that this gives God gratification. And this is especially so in the diaspora, because there the atmosphere is not, it's not the Holy Land, not a holy environment. The opposite, klipa, sitra acher. Therefore, there's, since for God there's no greater joy than taking darkness and transforming it into light, taking bitterness and transforming it into sweetness. Right? So the darker things are, and you bring light there, is even greater joy to God Almighty. So when we're in the diaspora and we're pervaded with this awareness of God's unity, that his joy is even greater, right? This is amazing. So not only do we have a joy because God is close, because we're united and one with God, but when I have a challenge, when I have a darkness, when I have a darkness, 7:30. Okay. So, okay, go rest, go rest. Okay. So no greater joy that God has than I take the darkness in my life and I transform it. Wow. This is the verse that says in Tehillim and Psalms, Yismach Yisrael b'Yasav. Rejoice, Israel, in your maker, not in your creator, in your maker. Here's what does that mean? This is one of the 12 psukim, one of the 12 verses that the Rebbe says children and adults should know. Shkol mihu miser Yisrael, whoever's the seed of Israel, he ought to rejoice in God's joy. Asher sas v'sameach, who is God, who is happy and joyous. When we make an abode for God in this low sphere, in this low, low world. Now, me is in the plural, makers, because God's making plurality. And what do we do? From plurality, public domain, we make it into a private domain, singular. God creates that. He's the maker of it. And we now make from darkness into light, from plurality, in other words, not the unity of God, and we bring it from the public domain, as it were, into the private domain, the oneness of God. And God has great joy in that. We should rejoice, the Alter Rebbe is saying, in the fact that God's rejoicing in this. Wow. Is that powerful? Is that beautiful? I don't know if that idea exists anywhere. You have joy because God has joy. Your joy is my joy. It's a very unique idea. Your pain is my pain. Because if you're having pain, I could, uh, I can have sympathy, empathy, because we know what pain is. So your pain is, I'm feeling your pain. But your joy is your joy, not mine. Pain, all of us don't want to have. So it doesn't matter what the pain is. The pain, so therefore, your pain can be my pain. But joy, your joy, you know, is the thing that gives you joy. My joy gives me my joy. So your joy is your joy, my joy is mine. You don't say, oh, your joy is my joy. Who says? Well, only the Alter Rebbe says it. God's joy should be our joy. That's extremely powerful to be able to have that sentiment. And here it is that God has joy in me, making a dwelling place for him in this low world. This low world darkness, that there's a plurality, and I connected to God, unified with the unity and the oneness of God. God takes great joy and pleasure in that, and therefore should I. Amazing. Frank, what is the difference between creator and maker? Because maker means, oh, excuse me. Ah, mm. The word, it's ba'oisav, asiya, with action, making action. So, in other words, in the world of action, which means the lowest world, the world of asiya. Creator is creator of everything. When you're saying the maker, so he's the world, he's the maker of the world asiya, which means the world of action, the lowest world, right? So in other words, take joy of God in the world of action, which means the lowest world, right? Just like action is the lowest thing, not the lowest thing that you can do, but the lowest power that a person has. Intelligence is much greater. Feelings is, right? Communication is much greater. Actions, well, animals can do actions. Little babies can, with their hand, do an action. It just shows here on the lowest thing that in that lowest place, take pleasure, take joy. That God, we make a dwelling place for God in the lowest realm, in the world of action, the physical world of action, and we make a dwelling place for God here, and that God has a pleasure in that. How do we do that? Because this lowest world is dark, and that we unite it with the divine through doing a mitzvah. So God has pleasure in that. So you take pleasure in that. You take joy in that. Pretty powerful. Jeff, where is God's presence today if we don't create the sanctuary? In every mitzvah we do, in the study of Torah we do now, in taking the darkness in me and in the world around me and transforming it into the light of God. All right, folks, today's the fast of Esther. Tonight we hear the Megillah. Tonight is Purim. Tomorrow's Purim. We'll have scheduled today, we'll do Rambam now. Tomorrow we'll do our morning schedule. That might, because of the Megillah reading in the morning, so I don't know, we'll be with Chumash Rashi. May not be, but Tanya will be. All right. Amazing. I'm Rabbi Ronnie Fine, coming to you, Chabad Zich and Kadesh, Montreal, Canada. It's a privilege and pleasure to share with you, Tanya. I'm coming up. Thank you for joining. Have an amazing. We should transform this day of fasting into complete joy. Mashiach now.